Hello. So this time I thought it would be kind of fun to do a video that could be more for both readers and writers. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between novels and novellas, because I think some people get a little bit confused about the difference between them, especially since they don't really talk about the difference between them a lot. And when an author releases a novella, they don't really market them all that differently. So I wanted to talk about it a little bit because I really, really enjoy novellas, and I have a ton of them because I enjoy them so much and I think they're so fun, and I would really love to write one. I have dreams of writing a novella, so I wanted to talk about it, and I think that will be fun. So I'm going to jump right into it. I have like little notes so that I can talk about the differences and the similarities. So here we go. We're going to just jump right on into it. So first we'll talk about what everybody I think will know about, and that is novels. A majority of what we all have on our bookshelves are novels. So novels generally have 40,000 or more words in them, and that typically means they have about 200 or more pages in them. They almost always have chapters, and I say almost always because there are some instances where we have books such as like Cujo, or where is she? Carrie by Stephen King. This was in his era of not having chapters, like, at all. If you have either of these books or have read either of these books, I will like briefly flip through it for you. There are no chapters. Like, not a single chapter to be had in either of these books. They are just like story right through. For somebody who has to finish a chapter before they can stop reading, it's a little bit painful for me. But, you know, such is life. So that's why I say almost always. They pretty much always have chapters. Oh my gosh. Trying to squeeze books back on my shelf becomes more and more of a struggle all the time. You know what? She'll go back in later. She'll sit there for now. But yeah, they generally have chapters. They are going to include a lot more characters in them. A lot of novels will include multiple points of view. We've been seeing that a lot more lately. When I was younger and was first becoming a reader, now I started reading in like kindergarten. Like, I was reading my first chapter books in kindergarten. Junie B. Jones was like my homegirl back then. But there wasn't really a whole lot of books that I read or encountered that were more than one point of view. So at least in my mind, that's a more recent thing. We see that a lot in romance and in fantasy. I've seen that here and there in like my horror and my thrillers. I don't know if I see that super often in my fiction, but I see it mostly in romance and fantasy. It's very common now, and I really love it. I don't know who started that, but props to you, because I love being able to get into more than one person's head. I absolutely love it. Mwah. Best invention. Whoever did it first, you're a real one. But the biggest difference between a novel and a novella is it's bigger. That's the biggest difference. Novels are always going to be bigger, longer, beefier than a novella. So with that, I will move on and give you the stats on Novellas. And then I'll show you some examples of mine to show you differences, and that'll be fun. So here we go. I'm going to give you novella stats. Okay, so novellas, on the other hand, they are usually just slightly smaller than novels. They typically have 17,500 to about 40,000 words in them. Usually it doesn't quite make it to 40,000 words, but they can be up to around 40,000 words. That typically puts them in the 60 to 200 pages range. Sometimes they are just barely on the cusp of being a novel, and I do have some novellas that are just barely on the cusp of being a novel, and I do have some novels that are just barely over that line from novella. So I will be showing you some of those in the next little segment. But novellas do normally have chapters too. I don't think I have any novellas that don't have any chapters. And unlike novels, they tend to center around like 2 to 4 characters. They're very short, so they usually focus on like one task or one main idea, and they just hammer that one thing. Some examples of novellas that I really love and I think are really done well. Up here, we'll move Carrie out of the way because I haven't put her back yet. But Stephen King's 1922. This is on my list of all-time favorite novellas. If you want to get into horror or want to get into Stephen King, but you're a little bit nervous about it, this is the novella to do it. This is one of the best novellas I have ever read in my life. I absolutely worship this novella. Another really good one by T. Kingfisher is What Moves the Dead. I swear this book could have been a novel. This could have been a novel, and I would have continued to gobble it right up. I still need the second. So this is a series of novellas, but I only have the first novella. I need the second one. Like, biblically, I need the second one. This book was so amazing. I have yet to find the second one in a paperback, so I'm not sure if they even make it, which is sad. I need it in a paperback so it can match the first one. But those are two of my favorite novellas. Another one that I really love that is not in print anymore is Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. This is a very, very short one. Like, I seriously read this in like, I think 3 hours. This was a very good book. But there are also, oh my lord, I'm terrible at putting my books back on my shelf today. There are also a lot of times you will find novellas that are put together into, like, I don't want to call it an omnibus because it's not an omnibus because they don't go together. But a lot of authors will take a bunch of their novellas and put them together into a bigger book. A good example of that, I believe, Highest Bidder from Lauren Landish and Willow Winters is a mixture of 4 novellas in one. If I am incorrect about that, please correct me. But I know that W. Winters mainly does novellas, I believe. I know she does have some full-length novels, but I believe she mostly does novellas. I think that this is a amalgamation of novellas. I believe that All He'll Ever Be is the same way. Yes. Complete collection of the Merciless series, but it is a series of novellas. So you can find, like this, a bunch of novellas grouped together, which is also pretty cool. I like that. But another part of me also really likes having the little individuals. Another good example of this by Stephen King is The Green Mile. You can buy it in the whole full big book, or you can buy it in the little individuals, because he did write them as little individuals. But yeah, those are the stats for novellas. So now I'll show you some examples and we'll talk about some differences. Okay, so we have now reached the similarities / differences and examples portion of the video. So I have, from my shelf, grabbed some little examples. First, for you, I have grabbed Pay the Piper. Do not ask me about it because I have not read it yet. The rest of these books I will show you I have read. I just wanted to pick from my shelf something that looked like the length of a typical novel. So this is what I believe is like the length of a typical novel. Like when I look at this book, I think, yeah, that looks like the length of an average novel. This is 313 pages long, which sounds pretty average to me. Another book that looks like a pretty average length to me is Catch-22, but that one is like around 500 pages, which does sound a little long. So this I would say is like in the range of like average novel size. Now, I will grab something that is on the thicker side of novels. Stephen King's It. She's thick. She's not the thickest book that Stephen King has ever written. The Stand is Stephen King's longest book ever written. Not by very much, only by a little bit. But it... Let me see here. I know that there are page numbers. I think there's a... Yeah, there's a little bit of something extra in the back. I have to get through... Let's see, 1,153 pages in it. So this is a little over 1,000 pages, which is not the typical length of any book on earth. Like, even when you look up, like, how long a novel is, when it gives you a range of pages, this is more than the range it will give you. So this is longer than any novel should be. When you go on TikTok and you see like that sound that's like, how could it ever be this serious? This is the kind of book I think about, because like, how could it be this serious, Steve? Love your work. Can't wait to read it. But how could it be this serious? I can't wait to read it. Don't get me wrong. I'm very excited. I'm overjoyed. But it's a little much. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, I have Tender as the Flesh. This is a novel that I have that is just barely crossing the line into novel. This book has 209 pages in it, so this is just barely a novel. Now, I also have with me This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is just barely a novella. Now, I have to go past the discussion questions because there are discussion questions in here. 198 pages in this book. So this is just barely a novella. And this is just barely a novel. They are very similar in thickness. So this is what I mean when I say sometimes it gets a little bit confusing. They are both around the same amount of pages. They are both around the same amount of words. But they are in different categories, like completely different categories. So you do have to think about that when writing a book. So technically these aren't usually marketed differently, but they kind of should be, in my opinion. But I think it's kind of funny too, that this and this are almost exactly the same thickness, almost exactly the same like word count, page count, but one is a full-length novel and one is not. Now what I have is one of the shortest books. I think this actually may be the shortest book that I own. This is Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption by Stephen King. This is his shortest book ever written. This is a novella. 111 pages. This is a teeny tiny little guy, and I had so much fun reading it. Stephen King does an amazing job with novellas and full-length novels. Like, the man leaves no room for anybody else. He just is amazing in everything that he does. But, yeah, those are my examples. And this also shows how vastly different novellas can be, because these are both novellas. But look at how thick this one is compared to this one. It's amazing. So yeah, those are my examples. Let's wrap this up. So there you have it. Novels and novellas are both vastly different and not different at all at the same time. I find them to be very interesting and very confusing. I think that it is kind of funny when authors will just like throw a novella in there. Like, for example, in the Powerless trilogy, it is a trilogy with a random little novella sprinkled in. Now I understand why the novella is in there, because it is not technically part of the trilogy. It follows a different character and it gives us a little bit extra. And I personally think that this is the perfect use for a novella when in a series. Love that. This is perfectly thought out and perfectly placed. This was beautiful. Now, another way that I really enjoyed a novella was actually A Court of Frost and Starlight. Everybody else that I talked to despised that novella. I loved it. I thought it was a nice break from battles and crazy, like, bullcrap. I like a nice, calm, Christmassy, like, oh, we're building puzzles and doing cutesy stuff. I enjoyed that. I thought it was cute and I thought it was a nice break. Other people didn't agree, but whatever. I digress. Another series that utilizes novellas a whole lot is the Shatter Me series. I adore the Shatter Me series. I worship the Shatter Me series. I 100% believe that those novellas could have been novels, but I also like the placement of the novellas. Do I think the story could have proceeded without the novellas? Absolutely not. Those novellas were needed. In the Powerless trilogy, that novella wasn't needed. You could continue on with that series without reading that novella. You didn't need it. You have to read the novellas in the Shatter Me series, or you will not understand what you are reading when you move on to the next novel. So that's another reason that you have to be a little bit careful with novellas when writing novellas into a series. Sorry, my mic died. We are back. As I was saying, you need to be careful when writing novellas into a series or when reading a series with novellas, because sometimes they are detrimental to the reading. Now, I don't think that you will know if they're important until you get there, which is the only sad part. So I think that we are relying on authors a whole lot on that front, which is why I think authors need to kind of be the one to be a little bit more careful about that. So, you know, that's a little meh. Also, a lot of authors kind of start out writing novellas. George Orwell is a very good example of this. 1984 is technically his debut novel. A lot of times when they talk about an author's first work, they talk about their debut novel because that is their first like official work. But the first thing that he ever wrote that was published was Animal Farm, which is a novella. A lot of people get a little angry about that because they give a lot of praise to 1984, his debut novel, and people say, well, that wasn't his first work. Animal Farm was his first work, and it was just as good. So, novellas are still very important, and they are just as good as novels, sometimes even better. So, people need to start writing novellas more, I think. If you're wanting to get into writing, try writing a novella. Even if that's not what you're going to put out and publish, try writing a novella, even just for you, because that can be good practice. And you can always take a novella and build on it later and turn it into a novel. Or you can always write more novellas and put them together into a collection and just publish them as a collection. So, just some things to think about and just some thoughts. I thought it would be fun to talk about. So, yeah, that's really all I have. I hope you liked this one. Maybe if you did, I can do more videos that are kind of like this. But that's all I really have for you. So, happy reading. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time.